Hey, hey, this is Ankita,
And this is Nalini.
and you are tuned in to Prickly Pears, the podcast where we celebrate uninhibited women and their prickly points of view. This is season 3 called Spouse It Up, and without further delay, Nalini, who do we have on our show today?
I am so happy to introduce our guest for today, Aboli Moharkar. She lives in Pune. She has a story that inspired me from the moment I talked to her and I saw her on Instagram. We don't personally know each other, and Ankita and myself included are so interested in listening to your story and getting all your learnings. So, without further ado, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi Nalini, hi Ankita. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. As Nalini mentioned, I am from Pune. Professionally, I have transitioned my career. I was an investment banker before and now I moved into the field of mental health. And I am also a certified mountaineer, so that's like one of my hobbies that I pursue. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to unfold this conversation.
Before we get into more, tell me, you did a big mountaineering expedition recently, right?
Yes, I did. So after all these years, I think I had a gap of like couple of years after everything happened. I couldn't continue it again, but this year again I did an expedition. The whole reason of like starting again was I am carrying the same flag on the summit, the in the same flag that he was wrapped into. So that's the whole reason that I started climbing again.
That's amazing. So now getting straight into it, can you tell us your marital status? Because that's what our theme of the show this season is.
Yeah, so I am a widow. I'm a war widow. People who don't know what war widow is somebody who has lost their partner in the battlefield. So my husband was an army officer, and I lost him around 7 years back. So that's the status as of now.
Do you mind sharing how long you were married?
Yeah, so we were married for 4 years, and unfortunately, I lost him on the day of our fourth anniversary. And before that, we were dating for 7 years almost. So it was all 7 years of long distance, and then we got married. All the fairy tale kind of a thing that the first boyfriend got married to the same person, and yeah, we had a long around more than 10 years of relationship.
And what age were you when you got married?
I was 23.
And when you met, you were in your teens?
17, yeah.
A love story for the ages when you think about it. Jumping into, tell us a little bit about when you were growing up, Aboli, because you met the love of your life at 17. So while growing up, what did you think of marriages and life partnerships, and what did you expect out of something like this?
So I think now when I look back, I definitely know that I was looking forward to get married. I was looking forward to have a relationship. And I think one of the major reasons was the exposure that I got or know about a relationship or a marriage was through my parents, and looking at them, looking at their relationship, that always gave me that kind of an assurance that okay, marriage can look good, and because they are really good friends and they still have that all that kind of a bond and rituals of their own, and the way they share that relationship, though it's a very conventionally gender role based marriage, but there's still a lot of respect. So that always gave me that sense of assurance that okay, this is something that I would like to consider. But for me, I think the marriage came in the picture because of the long distance. And then when we got the chance to live together, unfortunately, in armed forces, if you want to live together with the person you love, you have to be married. And then it was it for us, like, because that was like a next step that was necessary to live together after all these years of long distance. So I think that's how it started for
So
me.
at the end of the day, it was the paper that you have to submit to the army to, what is it called? Part 2 order? Is it still called the same? Part 2 order in the army to,
Yeah, part water. Yeah, yes.
if you have a part 2 order is when you can get an accommodation, right?
Yeah. And then you can officially like live together.
So with that, you got married to your childhood sweetheart. Everything was lovely, I imagine, at the time. And did marriage turn out to be what you had imagined in the past?
For me, definitely yes, because we had waited like long enough to know that, how is it to live together finally. So for me, I think I realized my primary expectation was to be with the person, to create that home together and get to share that space. But as soon as I got married, I think I got the reality check of being an army wife about how am I expected to be, how society is expecting me to be in a certain way, even as a woman, because now I'm a married woman. So all of that came as a little shock to me, because I still remember the first time when I reached there, the location where we were posted, and it was a small town in Jammu Kashmir. And when I attended the first event and I came back home crying, because everybody there was calling me Mrs. Praful, and I was like, why nobody's calling me a bully? And that felt like a, threat for to my individuality, and I felt very bad that day, that okay, this is how my life is going to be now. So honestly, I always had that internal conflict, especially being an army wife, because I grew up in a household where there was no discrimination between me and my brother. We were raised very equally. I never remembered that, something that my parents stopped me doing from just because I'm a girl. So coming from such background and then coming to such a community where it's pretty gender based, it's pretty much clear about what role an army wife does and what role is an officer playing. So for me, it was a bit difficult. Also, I think I had a very different interest. Like when we were living together in Kashmir, for me it was like, okay, this is a good time. So Praful kind of suggested that, let's just start getting on your professional courses of mountaineering. So we started preparing for that. So I used to be out for months climbing mountains, coming back all tanned and like completely exhausted. And then in all of that between, I was attending army events and doing all the welfares and parties and all those kind of things. And for me, it felt like a very different experience. But now, just talking about the sense of community that army holds, I think it's very profound. It's beautiful, and it's those bonds are unshakable, because even after so many years, I still have a lot of support. I still have a lot of good, healthy relationships with the forces and the families that I've lived together with. So that is definitely there. But yeah, I mean, looking at the whole conventional image of an army wife, I always struggle to carry that.
Could you share a little bit about your professional arc? Because in my head, I'm trying to calculate. You got married at 23, moved to this small village at that age. How long were you there, and were you working at that point of time?
So I was there for 2 years and I was not working, because back then the remote work was not this common, and especially in the investment banking field, it was not there. So I was not working, and that's how we decided that, I just have 2 years. Which generally, what happens in such scenarios is mostly army wives are get into teaching and all. That's the most common profession. So for me, it was like I was not interested. So that's how I got into mountaineering. Like I finished all my professional certifications and everything during that time.
Got it. So you were in investment banking before, and then you quit to move to J&K,
Yeah.
and then you were there for 2 years. After 2 years, where did you go, and did you get back into working, or like what happened? I'm curious about the choices you've had to make. So obviously you chose to live together with the person you're in love with, and which is why you got married. So you had to put your career on pause. But then, like, how long and how did that
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. So I came back to Pune. I started working again. So life started again how it was before I got married. I was working in Pune in another investment bank, and the long distance started again because he was then back in the field.
And was this tenure the tenure where you lost him?
No. Yeah, field tenure. Yeah, not
So
when
the
we lived
second,
together.
like the one where you were living in Pune, are you comfortable sharing what happened?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So when I moved back to Pune and I was working, and we had again a long distance relationship, he was there in the field. After 2 years of that, one day I got a news that he is no more. I was aware about the criticality and the condition over there. Of course, they don't share everything, but I had an idea because, yeah, I mean, it was a critical posting, but I never expected that, because just being aware is different, and this is something that you can never be prepared for. So that definitely came as a shock to all of us. Yeah.
And what happened? Like right after you received the news, what happened?
Yeah, it was my, as I said, it was my fourth wedding anniversary. So I was supposed to go there, but because he was so busy and it was just not possible. So I was in Pune, and of course, I think initial few years, I would say not even months, but it was in denial because I was used to long distance, right? So for me, nothing had changed. It was just I was not getting calls from him. So I was in denial for a long time. And that period was pretty dark and pretty unexpected because nobody prepares you for this. Like, no, you're not supposed to be widowed in your late 20s. And in society in general, we don't even talk about death, grief very openly. So for me, that struggle was very much complex, and it was at many levels, because for me personally it was a loss, the absence of a person, to know that okay, now how my life is going to be, because I was just thrown into that path of unknown without my choice. So that was quite terrifying. This was like an internal struggle. Outside, the reason was completely different, because there people were looking up to me through this lens of pride, because I was kind of a person who has sacrificed, and there was a glory attached to being a war widow. So I was called by different politicians, organizations. There were events that were happening. So at one side, people were looking at me and Praful as somebody who are like under the name of patriotism, and on the other side, what started observing was I have been like people have started treating me very differently, especially at any religious or auspicious events where I was intentionally not invited or kept aside. And then it struck me, because till that moment I never felt it. So if you have never experienced it, you will never know about it. And then I started realizing, oh, I mean, this is because and now I'm a widow, and how it's considered as a bad woman in any auspicious thing. And that struck me with this whole, again, the balance between the patriotism where people are looking at you with the lens of pride, and then there's other thing where people are just like looking down upon you. So that felt very helpless, that felt very unfair. And even at the larger side, I felt people were not aware of how to be with somebody if somebody's grieving. I mean, I always feel this. There's a funny thing about grief is, more than the person who is grieving, it's awkward and uncomfortable for other people, because they don't know how to approach. They don't know whether to talk about the loved one, whether to not talk about them, how to approach you. So in all of this, I lost a lot of close people, because they didn't know how to be there for me. So all of this just made me realize that, in my own path, in my own journey, that there's a larger truth. Truth is where society is not well equipped to handle grief. Society is not aware to how to support anybody who is going through any kind of mental health challenges or grief, especially because grief itself is a very isolating journey. And in that, if you don't get a proper support, it is just going to make it very difficult for that person. And that's what happens most of the time. For women, it is still, I feel, is okay to grieve in public or to cry about it, but for men it's a different struggle, where they are just expected to suppress their pain and appear to be very strong. And because of the pressure of being a war widow, I also felt it, where I was just supposed to gulp that pain and put on the face of just pride. So all of this seemed very unfair to me, and this affected me so much that I decided that I want to change my field. I do not want to work in the investment banking anymore, and that's how I quit my job. I took a break. I did my masters again in TIS Mumbai, and then I started working in the field of mental health. So my own struggle, which gave me this direction, and that's how I started holding up space for other people, where this support group for grief started, where adults who have lost their partners, they all came together, and now we are like holding that space for each other, where people are just coming together, grieving together, celebrating together. That's just an attempt to give people that space, which I did not get when I was going through that phase.
And what do you wish was different? We will come to your, what you do now, which is such a, I think it's such a grace to humanity what you do. But at the time when you were going through this, like if you had to be the person dealing with someone, what you were going through, what would you wish was different at the time?
Yeah. So I think just letting that person be, I mean, letting that person grieve, because again, till now, culturally, religiously, we all are allowed to grieve till what, 13th or 14th day in Hinduism. And after that, you're just supposed to not talk about this person or not talk about your grief and just push it under the carpet. And having that pressure of just being normal again, for women, especially, the pressure of like, now just move on. So that pressure is another thing. So all of these things, I feel more than the person who is grieving, there's this expectation from others to fit in, because they are awkward, they are uncomfortable, and they don't know what to do with this grief. So they are like pressurizing in a way, directly, indirectly, for that person just to be okay as soon as possible. And it's not possible, because grief itself is such a deep journey and very lonely journey for that person. So if they try to suppress their feelings and try to be normal for others, it is just going to make it difficult for them. So what I would do differently is to let that person just be. If they want to grieve in whatever, in whichever ways they want to be, just knowing that I'm here silently. Like it's very common in our culture, when we want to be there for someone, we end up giving advices. we end up suggesting few things, but sometimes just sharing that silence is so powerful. So just being there with that person, knowing that, I'm there. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. If you do not want to talk about it, still I'm here, but I am here with you. I think that itself is very, very important.
Aboli, I'm so sorry to hear everything that you've gone through. I think you were right in saying that at the age in your late 20s, you don't expect to land as a war widow. So thank you for having, like Nalini said, the grace to actually take all of that and repurpose it in such a beautiful way. So tell us about your life now. Talked about your support group, you talked about going back to school, changing your career stream. Two strands, right? Like professionally, how have you used all of your experiences, but also personally, what's your opinion on love now? And when you're hearing all of that pressure to move on, is there pressure to also like find love again?
I think I have always been on the spectrum when it comes to that feeling. I remember one incident and I always hold it to myself because that was very special. So I think a couple of weeks after I lost Praful, I was sitting with my best friend and she just said that, you do not have to move on conventionally what people are expecting. You just need to move forward with him. And that changed a lot of things inside me. That just gave me that assurance that I do not have to leave him behind. I do not have to leave what happened behind. That actually helped me to just know that what people consider move on is very typical. It's very much around the love factor and romantic space, but move on is a lot more than that. I mean, when you start looking at yourself from a different angle, when you start moving through all phases of your life just by yourself. So for me, that move on doesn't now just come with a romantic factor. Initially it was very difficult. I had built that like huge walls around me that nobody would talk to me about it. Nobody were allowed to talk to me about it because for me that time that felt very cruel to even think about somebody else. Because for me, I created a life with this person. Like, when I started knowing about love, this person was there in my life and we had like the entire decade together, and then just not having him and thinking about somebody else felt very, very impossible in the beginning. But I think with time, what has changed is I know for a fact now my identity is not just being a war widow. When I started looking beyond that identity, I realized that I am a bully first and I can do anything that I want just because now this is attached to me. It's just a part of me. This is not completely like who I am. I can still do everything that I want to. I can still build a life that I want to. And that really helped me. So for me, moving on come from that perspective. And considering about like what I now feel about love, I still feel I'm very much loved. I have been very fortunate that I got to see that kind of love in my life. Had a very healthy marriage, healthy relationship, all of that. And I see people struggling to even feel that once in their lifetime. So I had it already once. And I still feel like love is a very powerful and very beautiful thing to have. So I am now at a place where I will not say that, oh, never, like I can never think about it. I am definitely now, more open to talk about it because I feel with all these years I have built a strong foundation with myself. So now the love is more about a companionship. It is not about a label of being married or not. It is beyond everything for me now, labels and how society look at the relationship. For me, first is it's not a solution. It's not something that I'm expecting that, oh, somebody else will come and like help me with my grief and my journey. This just knowing that it's my own journey, it's my own responsibility to keep myself happy. And now whatever that will happen, it's just like an addition to my life. But I already have my own share of love, and that's helping me also.
And you said it's a spectrum, right? So in your mind, Praful is somewhere on that spectrum, and then there is like other people in your life. And say if you find another companion in life later on, do you think like where would they be on a spectrum? Have you thought about it, or like for you right now, that's not something on your mind?
So when I talk about spectrum, the spectrum for me is not for the other person, but for me it is to consider that on other side where I can never think about it. So I was pretty angry when anybody talked about it before, and the other side of it is now when I consider the remarriage part. So it's like those two ends for me now. So with time, with phases, I have like been on that spectrum. That's what I meant.
Like the title of the season, of course, is Spouse It Up, which looks at partnerships in the traditional sense. You've been through different phases. What is your advice, say, for Nalini and me? Would you have done things differently if you knew everything that you knew now? And like for someone who is in a marriage, like for Nalini, like what should she look at differently than what you probably did?
Hmm. I think I wouldn't have done anything differently, knowing because I still don't regret any of the things that I had. Because I think I would have done it in the same way again for the same reason, because to be in the forces I had to be married. So for me it came with that. But considered if he was not an army officer and if he would be outside, definitely I wouldn't have gotten married that early. I would have had other experiences and we would have lived together. But that was not a choice. So that was definitely just one part that I think I would have done differently. I think for me personally, now the label does not matter. I think it also my own journey, the sociology, the study that I did afterward, it has made me question a lot of things that we believe in. It has made me see that how there's always this critical lens of why do we do certain things, and is it only because we want to, or is it because we are being told that this is the next step in your life and this is the milestone and this is what you have to achieve. So for me now, I do not believe in that, where I feel any person's markers in life are not about their relationship status, how much do they earn, or how do they look. These are not markers for me anymore. So these are just labels maybe given to us. So if you ask me personally, that doesn't matter if they are married or not. It's completely between two people what they want to do and why do they want to get married. Because if you are in that healthy space, I think that should not matter. The label and the legality should not matter. There might be multiple reasons. As in India, it's still very difficult to live together and have children if you want to have family without getting married. People are doing it now, but it's still very rare. So for that reason, somebody might have to just consider to get married. But I think the one thing that is still common and I would like to talk about is just that sense of individuality that should never go. Even if you are married, you're in a relationship, even if you're single, in any relationship for that matter, even in friendship or any other relationship, that once you start seeing that your sense of individuality is being taken by someone, by a relationship, it is definitely a reminder for you to just take a pause and ask yourself that why am I here and why do I want to do this. Because most of the time we don't even realize, but we stop taking any brave or authentic step in our life because of the conditioning that we have for years, and we have been told certain things since we were very small. So that's one thing, do not ever settle for something just because you're afraid to be alone, because that's a beautiful thing. Like once you figure out how to be by yourself, I think then the relationship, then the marriage, everything that you have is like an addition in life, and then it's actually a beautiful journey which helps you to grow and build that together. So I think that is definitely, it's something that I'll always hold on to.
So, would you say that right now, after all these years of introspection and being by yourself, would you say you know yourself better now than you did when you got married at 23?
Absolutely. I mean, not just the age, I think, but what has happened to me has made me question a lot of things about myself, about the society, about the gender, and how everything works around us, right? Because apart, that depth in my life has come because of the incident. It has turned, I think, 180 degrees. Now the kind of relationships, friendships, decisions, choices I have it has completely changed. I don't think so I'm the same person that I was back then. I was not questioning enough, I feel.
This takes me to a learning that we got from our previous season. You know, we talked to Namrata Kohli in our previous season, who went underwent a near death experience herself, and right at that point is when she started questioning all the things in life. And even with your story now, I feel like something like major traumatic, big, life threatening, life changing needs to happen for us to start thinking so deeply about why we are here. This, like, it almost makes no sense, right? But that's what happens today, that we're so busy living our lives at the pace that we do things without questioning until something groundbreaking happens. But I wish people listening to this take a pause wherever they are, take a pause and just dedicate those 5 minutes a day, or even right after you listen to this, to think about where you're going and the decisions you're making and where they're taking you in the long term. But yeah, that was my rant.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, right? We as a human, we learn the most when we are suffering. We learn the most when we are going through something so challenging. We don't learn like from our happy days or joyful phases of our lives. And that's the sad part. But it is, of course, possible to just maybe look at someone, listening to someone, and then introspect. But yeah, I never did that. Like, this completely came to me when everything changed.
I want to go to a question which we ask all our guests in this season, and it's finances. I know finances, as someone who was married and getting like two salaries to now, how have you dealt with it? Do you have any tips for people on that? Whatever you want to share.
For me, honestly, nothing has changed much because of the field posting and because of my background in investment banking. I was the one who was handling it anyway. It was like, because I was taking decisions for investment, the EMIs and house loans and all of that. So I was handling it. Now it just feels like there's no discussion before it. Initially, there used to be a discussion, and then, we are doing something. Maybe I am the last point of contact who is making it happen, but there was always a discussion, and now there's no discussion. So that feels off. That feels like, okay, I do have, like, a lot of responsibility on my own. But also, having said that, I think the good part about how it has been taken care of is because it was a battle casualty and it happened in the field. I've been supported by army financially, and that helps, because apart from that, I think it would have been a completely different story. I would have continued my investment banking job. I couldn't have, like, had a privilege to take a break and then study again and then get into the development sector, because believe me, I mean, in India, development sector, there, it doesn't pay well. So this choice could happen because, it was something that was being supported externally. So that I'm very much aware about. But I think most of the cases, widows who were dependent on their husband financially, I think that's the main struggle. And when everything comes to money, I think you do not have time to sit and talk about your mental health or your well-being or anything else, because then it's a survival struggle. So for those people, like especially in underprivileged class or, like, in rural areas, they do not have this kind of option. So that's why most of the women are forced to get remarried, because of the financial reasons. So I think what I would tell is, of course, you should be financially independent, but if there are conscious choices, even that you want to be a homemaker and he's being the provider and roles are very clear, still make it a point that you are saving for yourself separately and you're aware of the financial decisions and you're part of it. Because just because you're not earning doesn't mean that you can't take a decision on you. So that is definitely required, where you save up for yourself and take that decision and participate in that.
Sharing a personal experience, I grew up as an infantry kid where my father would get field posted every 3 years for 2 years. That's how it works. Right? So every time he was to go to a field posting, he would sit me and my sister and my mom down. So hoping that at least one of the three of us will remember which bank do we have an account in, and then he would take a quiz. What is the name of my insurance provider? If I'm not there anymore, who will you contact? What will you do? So we had an SOP of things, and mom would make us revise and practice like a test. Okay, do we remember everything every single time dad went on a field posting, because we didn't know when something like this would happen. Now, like, cutting to the civilian world, like, because I'm wired that way, that I have a Google Drive and a Google Doc for my parents and my husband to see where all my investments are shared with all these people, because like that inherent fear in my mind that, like, if I'm not there tomorrow, like, everyone needs to know about my money, because like otherwise it's lost. In the civilian world, people don't do this usually. Like, I realized much later that, like, no one thinks about money and how things are going to happen. We don't have a bully to summarize the episode with us because of some technical glitches, but I wanted to end the episode with a few key takeaways that I learned from Aboli's story, whose story is much more than just being a war widow. Her story is that of a young woman who fell in love at a time very early in life, and they had no choice but to get married because the army and the regulations of the government, they had to get married to live together. But what she said about taking a step back and thinking about spouses, the person you want to marry, and thinking about your own individuality when you're getting into a marriage, either really early as her or later in life, it's a decision that we all need to just take very carefully, and being cognizant of everything end to end. And marriage also comes with risks, like uh, your spouse being no more, or having to separate, or anything in between. And that's that's something that none of us are actively thinking about on a day-to-day basis, as we shouldn't. But the part about finance and the things that we should be careful of, should be sharing with our family all the time, whether it comes to where your finances are, what your savings are, what your insurances are. How would you live if one of you in a marriage did not exist tomorrow, right? Like, it's a scary thought, and it's okay to push it to the back of the mind on regular days. But as I was saying, I grew up as an army kid, and people do plan things in advance when you're in that life and death situation, as there is the case today with the India and Pakistan war impending, and lots of lives being lost, whether it's civilian or army or navy or the air force. We just need to be cognizant of how that affects family lives, and how, as functioning family units or as spouses, we support each other and support the society while we go through this. So I hope you all found this useful. It was a very, very emotional episode for me, given what's going on in the world today. But we're very thankful to Aboli again for spending all this time with us. She does run a grief support group for people who have lost their spouses, young or whatever age. And we're putting all the links to her paper, her research on being a widow, and especially being a war widow, and also her support group, if you wanted to join her or just follow her on Instagram to know what happens next in her life. Feel free to do that. And with that, we're out.